Tanche, welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Yesterday, while Canada stopped to acknowledge the legacy of residential schools, the Prime Minister took a family vacation to a popular surfing spot in BC. Our Kent Driscoll has been rounding up the national response to the PM's trip and joins us from Iqaluit. Kent, where are you exactly?
Thanks. I'm here on Iqaluit's breakwater, right in the middle of Frobisher Bay. And I can report that surf conditions are poor today. I mean, just have a look out there. Very calm water. You won't be catching a wave here today. That might explain why the Prime Minister chose to go to Tofino, British Columbia yesterday instead of here in sunny Iqaluit. Tofino, Canada's surfing capital. Now, after putting out a schedule that said he was going to be taking meetings in Ottawa, no one spotted the PM with a surfboard, but the political response was swift. The Native Women's Association of Canada said Mr. Trudeau could not take the time that his own government set aside to reflect upon the tragedy of Indian residential schools, and instead chose to flit off to Tofino for a holiday. The Conservatives and the NDP, they took their shots. The NDP's Charlie Angus said, "You attend events. That's why Remembrance Day is Remembrance Day. And Truth and Reconciliation Day has to have that same magnitude for Canadians. This is the very, very first one. He should have been there." Even his own cabinet seems reluctant to discuss the PM's vacation plans. In a press conference today, Health Minister Patty Hajdu said, quote, "I can't speak to other people's scheduling. What I saw in my community was a commitment to reconciliation." Now, the Prime Minister's office says the Prime Minister spent the day talking with residential school survivors, but wouldn't tell us who they were. So, if you spoke with the Prime Minister yesterday, let me know. Otherwise, I'll be out here, hoping for a wave. Back to you in Winnipeg.
Orange shirt events happened all across Canada yesterday, but Winnipeg had an especially large turnout with thousands marching down Main Street. Michelle Karlenzig was there to talk with survivors and a young man who was leading the front of the pack.
Pull it up quickly here.
Tatum Mentuck is only 7 years old, but he marched with thousands behind him yesterday. People in orange shirts flocked to the Canadian Museum for Human Rights yesterday to honor residential school survivors and children. Tatum walked for his family.
And my grandpa was in residential, means I'm walking for him and all the kids who didn't make it home from residential.
Media reports estimated nearly 10,000 people walked down Main Street to St. John's Park. Despite the heat and large groups, the powwow went all afternoon. Lori Abraham helped marginalized people get to the powwow and was shocked at the turnout.
Being witness to what is happening here today has really moved me to understand that our community and our nation is moving towards compassion and understanding, and that everyone here today, whether they're wearing an orange shirt or they're not, is supporting awareness and supporting moving forward.
Survivors from residential schools and the 60 Scoop were there to tell stories. Marcel French, born in Roseau River, said he's proud to be a part of these events.
This is just a part of a bigger picture of awareness and understanding of who I really am, and for the thousands of others that went through the same process.
As marches and honorings took place across the country, many hope the momentum lasts.
I hope that when they leave from here, that they can remember that in the following days, weeks, and have the understanding of what we as First Nations, Métis, of what we have lost and how we plan to regain it.
Michelle Karlenzig, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Let's go to Saskatchewan now and how residential school students were commemorated there. The Saskatoon Indian and Métis Friendship Centre held an Every Child Matters event. Along with a pancake breakfast and performances, there were also a walk for remembrance, and donations collected are going to go to the United Way there. The Wanushekuin Heritage Park held performances and discussions about truth and reconciliation and the residential school system, and the Dakota Dunes Resort hosted a prayer song for survivors and dance performances. Children were invited to get up and join in. The riding of Edmonton-Griesbach has elected its first Indigenous MP. NDP's Blake Desjarliss, Alberta's only Indigenous member of Parliament, following last month's election. He's 27 years old. He is Métis and Cree, and while there are LGBTQ MPs, it is believed that Desjarliss is the first 2S person, that's Two-Spirit of course, to hold this seat. He joins us for the first time since being elected. Blake, first of all, congratulations. Such a short time since you've been elected, and then right into National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. What does it mean for you to be in this position in office during such a kind of pivotal time here?
Well, I think, Melissa, first of all, thanks to all the viewers for my APTN debut in many ways. Woo. It's great to be here. And I do think that this week, particularly September 30th, our very first National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, is an important one for us to reflect on and to really understand the purpose of. I think right now is a critical moment in our history here in Canada, where Indigenous history and our pain and our reality is really being understood in a much more in-depth way than I think Indigenous people are used to. Yeah. Many Indigenous people watching probably remember having to explain your own story to your neighbor or to the store shopkeeper or to the regular people in town, and it takes labor. But what we're seeing this last week was many of these stories have been heard over the past several decades and are finally being retold and revisited and really reflected on. I really hope that all Canadians take the opportunity to realize what's happened and how deep this pain really goes, and to make sure that we're actually changing as a country, that we're pushing forward. And so I want to be part of that. And that's why I think it's so important to have Indigenous representation in the House of Commons, and why I'm so honored to be able to lift up our people's stories.
Well, and I think a lot of people are feeling that sort of sense of hope that you mentioned there too. However, we can't not talk about what also happened yesterday. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, first day of Truth and Reconciliation for this country, he jetted off to vacation with his family. I know you took to Twitter about that. How do you take something like that decision to go vacationing on this pretty important day?
Mm-hmm. Well, I certainly think that, I've heard from many folks on this issue, and I also understand that, everyone, of course, needs time and space to reflect on exactly what this is and what it means to each and every family and person. I understand deeply that if that's what he was doing, then good. But of course, as a member of Parliament, our job is to make sure that Canadians and our perspectives are heard. And what I've heard over the last 24 hours in light of that were a lot of people's pain. I've talked to elders and survivors and my own family members and community members who've seen that as a true lacking of the recognition that's required for a day like September 30th, a day where our job is to remember the individuals, their names, their faces of thousands of children who have died in Canada's horrific residential school system, but to also go the next step and recognize the current struggles and current trauma of Indigenous people, every single one of which has been affected by this history. It's so important to understand, especially on September 30th, that this history isn't just about Indigenous people. This history is also about Canadians and what Canadians have done. We have to understand that a prime minister of a country like Canada that has committed such atrocities, like we all know so deeply in our own families and our own histories, stories, and realities, it doesn't go far enough. What I would have liked to have seen, and what I've heard from many survivors and community members, is for him to have recognized the children on that day, to have gone to the graves, especially those in Kamloops in British Columbia, where they had sent invitations to the Prime Minister twice to be in solidarity with them, to understand what this means for the country. It's so important for the Prime Minister, especially the office of the Prime Minister of a country like Canada, to be present on a day like September 30th. And I'll just add that it's the same reason we expect our Prime Minister to show up on Veterans Day. It's the same reason we expect our Prime Minister to show up on Remembrance Day, is people's lives were lost. And even more so, he should be there because the responsibility actually lies at the federal government's feet for these things. At the very least, he could have shared words with all of us in many ways, in a deeper and much more commemorating way that would have shown us the kind of path forward for Canadians, or what Canadians should be focusing on. And that has to be the truth. There can only be reconciliation with truth, and we're not yet in the era of reconciliation. I believe we're still in the era of truth, and having to listen to what these stories truly mean and making sure our public officials are there in support of that work is critical, especially on the first day. So thanks for that question. And it was one that I felt emotional about, personal about, because my own family, I have uncles who passed away in the residential school system. My cookum went, my dad went. And it's so important to have heard the voice of the top official in the country to hear about what it meant to them, especially since they were the institution that created this.
Thank you so much, Blake, for taking the time to join us today.
Hi. Thank you, Melissa.
The Line 3 pipeline turned on the taps for the first time today. The Enbridge-owned pipeline connects Alberta to Wisconsin and replaces one that was over 50 years old. The 1,700-kilometer-long, $9 billion pipeline will add 370,000 barrels a day for a total capacity of 750,000 barrels of crude oil a day. The pipeline has seen protests in the United States with dozens of people arrested. Some have been shot with rubber bullets and had mace used against them. Well, we need to take a break, but there's lots of news still ahead, including new charges against fallen fashion mogul Peter Nygard. Stay with us. Welcome back. Fashion mogul Peter Nygard agreed to begin the extradition process today in a Winnipeg courtroom, just days after Toronto police laid the first Canadian charges against him. The 9 charges relate to alleged assaults on 6 women between the mid-1980s and the 2000s, including 6 counts of sexual assault and 3 of forcible confinement. The move comes just as Nygard agreed to begin the extradition process to the U.S., where he faces multiple sex trafficking and racketeering charges. APTN Investigates profiled Indigenous women who complained about Nygard to the Winnipeg Police Service and joined a U.S. class action suit. Winnipeg police say they have concluded their investigation and they've forwarded the results of the file over to Manitoba Justice. For more on that Nygard story and how Indigenous women were affected, you can watch Homegrown Parts 1 and 2 on our website, aptnnews.ca/investigates. Well, it was meant to be a week of commemoration in Quebec to mark the year anniversary of Joyce Echaquan's death at a Joliet hospital. Instead, it became a week of political infighting. Lindsay Richardson brings us the latest on that fallout.
The week was marked by moments of silence held across Quebec in respect for the late Joyce Echaquan. But silence wasn't observed in the National Assembly.
Come on, I will never accept that.
Premier François Legault is responding to a Liberal critic's assertion that Quebec's recently tabled nationalist laws make them complicit in feeding systemic racism.
I will never accept, never, either from Justin Trudeau or from Greg Kelly, that we put together the Bill 21, the Bill 96, and racism and some I don't know the word, but what happened to Joyce Echaquan, which is unacceptable.
Also unacceptable in the eyes of the Echaquan family, a disciplinary decision rendered on the anniversary. The nurse seen in Joyce's last video will receive a 1-year license suspension, after which she'll be allowed to return to work. Atikamekw leadership also spoke out on the decision and in a press release called this and Quebec's decision to rename a wildlife reserve after Joyce, quote, nothing but a smokescreen to divert attention. The family clearly expressed the need for time to reflect.
They are doing well, and I think they are really determined to fight.
Despite the recent turbulence, the Echaquan family's lawyer told APTN their hopes now rest on the release of the Quebec coroner's report and any recommendations it may include.
We're hoping that it will yield some recommendations that will really bring about some concrete changes, and that there will be some accountability for what happened to Mrs. Echaquan.
That exact Quebec coroner's report the Echaquan family lawyer just mentioned, well, it dropped unexpectedly this morning, days ahead of schedule. Lindsay Richardson was able to take a look at it, and she joins us now from APTN's Montreal Bureau with details. Great to see you, Lindsay. After a nearly 4-month wait, what are the coroner's findings?
Well, Melissa, it might end up just adding more fuel to this political fire because coroner Gehan Kamel's first finding and first recommendation in this report is for the province of Quebec to both acknowledge and eliminate systemic racism. Now, that's a call to action that the Premier hasn't yet responded to. We'll stay tuned for that. But it also determined that there are a number of changes that need to be made. We did hear some very specific details during the coroner's inquest. So in turn, the coroner's report does make some very specific recommendations, not just regarding Joliet Hospital, but also regarding the Regional Health Authority, its relationship with First Nations partners, and it even goes so far as to make recommendations as to how the nursing profession is taught in schools. So we won't bother to unpack all of that today, but we've linked to a copy of the coroner's report on APTN News online if you're curious and want to check it out.
That's, of course, at aptnnews.ca. So, Lindsay, was there any more details coming to light about Joyce's death itself?
Well, the report confirms what we heard during the inquiry, which is that Joyce's cause of death was lack of oxygen in her bloodstream caused by chronic heart disease. The report also concluded that Joyce did not die as the result of a criminal act. Instead, it determined that her death was accidental. However, had her complaints of pain been taken seriously by the nurses and healthcare staff on shift that night, and had their conduct not been I guess, guided by prejudicial points of view, then Joyce's condition could have been reversed and she could have ultimately have been saved that day.
You know, any reaction from the family or their lawyers as all of this is coming to light?
Nothing from the lawyer yet, though Joyce's widower, Carole Dubé, did post a Facebook status earlier this morning responding to the drop of the report. And in few words, he said a lot. He just copied blah, 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 blah over and over again. So that's what we're getting from the family, though next Tuesday in Trois-Rivières, there will be a more comprehensive summit looking at this report, including an opportunity for media to ask the coroner questions directly. And we're told representatives of the family, including their legal counsel, will be present on the ground there. And so will we. So we'll have more details on the reaction to this report, as well as how it's affecting the family later next week.
Well, we appreciate all of the work that you've put into this, and thanks for joining us, Lindsay.
Thanks for having me.
Time for another break, but still ahead, Indigenous business minds opened the Canadian stock market yesterday, starting with an honor song. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. Our very own Michelle Karlenzig was in the streets of Winnipeg, Manitoba yesterday, and this was the scene at the location of the historic Forks, where thousands gathered during the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. While you are out and about this weekend, be sure to send us your pictures. Send them to share at aptn.ca for a chance to be featured as our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Off to the east coast, we've got 15 in showers for Fredericton and Charlottetown, 16 and sunny in St. John's. Nain, sunshine and 8 degrees. Kuujjuaq, same thing. Gaspé, 11 and a chance of showers. Quebec City, 14 and a chance of showers there. 16 for Ottawa and rain expected. 13 in rain for Kapuskasing, 14 in rain for Timmins. Sunshine and 17 for Puckatawaga, 20 for the Paw and Norway House, sunny there. Sunshine continues down south. Winnipeg, 23. Brandon, 22. 22 for Regina, Swift Current, Yorkton, and Estevan. 15 in sunshine for Buffalo, Narrows, and Stony Rapids. 14 in showers expected for Uranium City. Mixed of sun and cloud, 14 for Fort Chip. Rain and 13 in Grand Prairie. Sunshine and 22 for Lethbridge and Medicine Hat. 19 and sunny for Red Deer. Quesnel, 12 and showers. Vancouver, mixed of sun and cloud, and 14. 8 and showers for Prince Rupert, 13 and sunny for Fort Nelson. 9 for Dawson City and chance of showers there. Old Crow, 4 and cloud. 10 in Wattie and Yellowknife for the chance of rain, same with Wrigley. 7 and sunshine for Paulatuck and Colville Lake. 9 in sunshine for Baker Lake. 9 in showers for Chesterfield. 5 in sunshine for Pangertung. Arctic Bay, 4 in cloud. Thousands of junior hockey players will soon be getting orange warm-up jerseys. That's because a Winnipeg jersey-making company partnered with the Orange Shirt Society and the Gord Downey and Chana Wendak Fund. With more, here is Daryl Stranger.
the kids ask the question, why are we wearing these jerseys? And from there, the conversation starts, and we hope to maintain that, momentum 12 months a year, not just, September 30th.
Today marks the unofficial kickoff of a new initiative called the Orange Jersey Project. 10,000 orange practice jerseys will be sent free of charge to youth hockey teams across Canada to spark dialogue about residential schools. Off-ice educational resources are also being put together by the Downey Wenjack Fund and the Orange Shirt Society.
The primary goal of the Orange Jersey Project is to educate and engage young Canadian athletes to help them understand the story of Indian residential schools and ultimately be a platform for truth and reconciliation in Canada. And then the third objective of the program is to promote mental health, physical and mental well-being for Indigenous youth.
Dylan Rowe is a former pro hockey player and helped start the initiative.
I didn't know enough about it, I'll be frank. When we started talking about kind of getting into this and how we could help, I wasn't aware of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that had the 94 calls to action. I was unaware of that. Like most Canadians probably are somewhat unaware of these calls to action. So we wanted to address calls to action 87 through 92, which are related to sport.
The hope is other sports become involved in the project.
And that's what we actually need to have happen, because hockey is definitely, Canada's big passionate sport, but kids are playing a lot of different sports, and this program, if it's able to reach those youth in those other sports, that's the way they can begin to understand. And the truth part of the Truth and Reconciliation is having those youth understand the history so that they can be empathetic and they become knowledgeable and understanding, and that's the only way reconciliation can take place.
A signed jersey auction is ongoing, featuring over 35 male and female hockey players from the NHL, NHL alumni, and national women's team players, including Carey Price, Ethan Bear, Brian Trottier, and women's hockey Olympians Bridget Lacquette and Jocelyn Larocque. The online auction ends October the 5th, with all proceeds going to the Orange Shirt Society. Gerald Stranger, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Well, even the stock market took time to honor the first Truth and Reconciliation Day, with the market being opened by the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business. CEO Tabitha Bull opened the Toronto Stock Exchange virtually, along with other members of the CCAB board, after an honor song by Bear Standing Tall, also known as Jason Carter. He's from the Onion Lake Cree Nation in Saskatchewan. Well, that is a wrap for your Friday news. I'm Melissa Ridgen. From all of us here, thanks for joining us. We will see you back here tomorrow with your APTN News Weekend.